We call it the solar coaster, and you just hang on for the ride.
An industry weathering the twists and turns of political change.
Huge demand, more than that people can keep up with.
This fall, business may be up, but next year comes the drop.
Fingers crossed we'll not lose a single soul. That's our goal.
How the solar industry is bracing for what's around the bend. And
this system has been incredibly difficult to navigate.
Public workers waiting on relief.
You try to be patient, but there's a lot of financial pressure on families right now.
Contact 6 navigates the confusing landscape.
I am definitely not the only person in this situation.
Of student loan forgiveness. From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Brian Polson, and I'm joined today by Jenna Sachs, Contact 6. Jenna, thanks for being here.
Always happy to be here.
Open Record's executive producer Sarah Smith is on assignment right now. She'll be back for Off the Record a little bit later on. We are recording this episode on Wednesday, October 15th, 2025, and today we're talking about a couple of consumer issues affected by political shifts in Washington, D.C. There's nothing happening there, is there?
Nothing at all. Not a lot of talk about that.
The two topics today, tax credits and loan forgiveness, specifically federal income tax credits for solar installations and forgiveness of student loans for public employees. Jen has been studying the impacts of these changes and speaking with those directly affected. We're going to jump into those topics right after the break. We are back on Open Record. Wisconsin's residential solar industry is seeing a boom in installations right now. I think they're all super busy, leading up to federal tax credits that are expiring at the end of this year. But next year, the industry is bracing for challenges. Jenna, you caught up with one solar installation company. How are they reacting to all of this? This seems like a big change in what's been around for a while now.
Right. Well, they call it the solar coaster for a reason, because this industry is constantly facing changes, especially when it comes to these tax credits. But we met up with Arch Solar, who's spoken with Contact 6 before. They do home and commercial solar installation projects. And when we spoke to them in September, they said, we have stopped all of our sales efforts for projects that want to finish by the end of the year to get those tax credits. Basically saying, we've spoken with utilities and local municipalities who inspect and do these connections, and we don't feel we can guarantee to people that they will get their projects done in time. At that point, they had 100 projects left to do for the rest of the year. They were meeting with employees saying, can you work extended hours? They seemed to be on board with that. They were going to be working Saturdays just to get all of this work done. But they said, there may be other companies out there who are promising they can get this done in time for that deadline. And they were just urging caution, saying there are things that can hold up this process. It takes a while to get inspections done, to get the interconnections done. And they just did not feel comfortable promising to people that they could take on any more work in order to get that tax credit.
So one key thing there, I want to step back for a second. It sounds like you're saying that to get this tax credit, which expires at the end of the year,
right,
it's not just that you have to have signed a contract to get this done. The work has to be completed in this calendar year.
That is the assumption they are operating under. So I am anticipating some complaints to Contact 6 at the beginning of next year from people who maybe thought they could get this all done, but maybe there was an issue with their installation and then they had to have an inspector come back. That's another 10 days you have to wait. And if you're really cutting it close with the deadline, I anticipate there might be some problems.
How much of a tax credit are we talking about here?
It's a pretty substantial one. So this tax credit has been a huge part of the solar residential sales pitch for decades now, and it is 30% federal income tax credit on residential solar projects. So basically, if you pay $10,000 for 10 panels, you'll get $3,000 back. And that is a huge economic driver for people, and a lot of businesses have really built it into their sales pitch, trying to convince people. Now, they'll still argue within the industry that solar is still a good economic investment with utility rates going up.
You're saving money every month and that sort of thing.
Right. I mean, it's not as good a deal, certainly, as it was with this tax credit. But they would say, compared to 20 years ago, it's a lot more economical to go solar. It costs less to get these panels. The panels are more efficient. And with utility rates, they're still going to argue it's a good economic driver to get this system.
And when you say tax credit, I want to be clear for those who don't know that tax credit is that's straight money. That's not a deduction on what you might eventually have your taxes calculated off of. This is a direct credit. So that $3,000 is $3,000 back in your pocket if you paid 10 for a system.
Right. And imagine if you paid 40 for a system, which some people do. So it's a huge amount of savings that people will no longer have access to as of January 1st.
Are you hearing yet from anyone who's concerned about this? Anyone who you know has purchased these that, I don't know if they're going to get the work done, or you're just thinking that's something you're going to hear more about as maybe we get into the new year?
I have not heard from anyone yet. I just know from the history of our segment, Contact 6, we take consumer complaints from people. We've gotten complaints in the past about residential solar systems that took a long time to get online. So I'm just basing this on my personal experience. I do know there are others in the solar industry who are concerned that it could happen.
What do you know right now about like the number of people who are having these things installed in Wisconsin and what's happening right now, knowing that this tax credit is going to be expiring soon?
Right. Well, basically the word we received from Renew Wisconsin, who we're going to speak with later in this podcast, and from local contractors is that they are very busy. We did ask We Energies for some numbers, but at this point, I don't think they show that last minute rush that people are going through. We do know that when it comes to solar energy connections, they have been rising quite a bit. So from 2020 to 2023, they rose 190% for We Energies connecting to the system. So that's a big increase. 2024 wasn't, it kind of declined a little bit, but they are expecting the numbers will be high for connections in 2025.
I know you've done a number of stories in recent years about solar installations. Sometimes you've had concerns about solar companies that were maybe not so reliable or problematic. For the people who are doing this, like how much can you save? Have you gotten that sense of, obviously you can save money because you're generating this renewable energy with utility bills going up? Any idea how much you can save? Maybe that's the best question.
I think we should definitely direct that to Ismail later.
Okay.
I think it depends on a few factors.
Sure.
So I'm going to let him give the best answer of that. I know they will argue that the savings are still there, but the tax credit was important to a lot of people, which is why they had this rush at the last minute. The interesting thing will be seeing how much is impacted next year, because Arch Solar was predicting their sales may drop 20 to 25%. And what they're going to do is really focus on commercial work, because commercial solar tax credits aren't expiring yet. There is a phase out of those credits as well. So they're going to turn to these other ancillary projects to get work done and keep their people busy. But for them, they also have a history of being electrical contractors, so they can just go back to that. The bigger problem may be for the smaller mom and pop solar shops that really relied on this tax credit.
Well, I wonder too, there's got to be pressure. I wonder if there are some right now that are saying if they're so busy, if everyone's rushing to get this in, are there some that are jacking prices up right now because demand is high and maybe making promises they can't keep? Is that a concern for consumers that that's not something I've heard before. Something I would be concerned about as a consumer if I were looking into getting this done is I would be wary of a business that just appeared, that has no history in the area, who maybe sees this rush and is coming in trying to take advantage, because I think those well-established local businesses might be the better way to go, because they have an office you can visit, they have people you can call. And if this is a business that just comes into the area and then leaves, which sometimes happens, that's more concerning to me. Well, I could see the opportunity, like you said, for someone who's maybe fly-by-night, comes out of nowhere, to go, there are people who want to get this done before the tax credit expires, and these reputable companies have these long wait lists, and they go, we're not selling anymore. Someone comes in and goes, forget them. We don't have the backlog. We can do it for you. And you could get yourself in some real trouble if you're not careful.
Right. I will say I haven't heard of anything happening yet, but we have done past Contact 6 reports about companies that just kind of came into the area in the solar industry and then disappeared, and people had difficulty with their systems and no one to follow up with. So we had done a story with Arch Solar in the past on that topic that you can look up, and really offering advice on how to hire a reliable contractor and maybe avoid getting into that position.
It seems like this would not be so good for the companies that are doing this, because when you talk about Arch Solar, they're having to stop sales for things that are before the end of the year. There's most businesses that are doing, they've got new sales going on while they're completing projects, and it's a cycle. When you've taken that break from these new sales, I'm sure that has an impact. Are you hearing about companies that are planning struggles ahead, that are planning layoffs, things like that?
Renew Wisconsin gave me a lot of insight into how a lot of other companies are doing, so we can certainly ask them about that. I will say this industry is really unique in that they're used to that roller coaster ride. These tax credits have been around since the 70s in some form or another, but there's been a lot of change with them. Sometimes they've come close to expiring and they don't. They get renewed at the last minute, or maybe they expire sooner than expected, or maybe it's given a significant extension. So it really depends on the administration in DC and the priority they place on domestic residential renewable energy. And it can change so much with who is in office. So they thought these current tax credits were going to exist for much longer, but the one big beautiful bill that was signed July 4th ended the tax credits earlier than expected as part of the tax and spending efforts. So this industry is actually really unique in that they're kind of used to just hunkering down and getting through it and waiting to see if something changes in 18 months. I don't think they think super far ahead and count on anything lasting.
Well, I think this is a good time for us to take a break. We've got that guest waiting to talk to us about this. Renew Wisconsin is a nonprofit that promotes renewable energy. And when we come back, Ismail Chartier, did I get that right? Is Director of Impact and Innovation. He's going to join us for a live interview here on Open Record. We'll talk to him about what to expect in the months ahead when we come right back.
Welcome back. Right now, solar contractors in Wisconsin are rushing to install residential solar panels before federal tax credits expire December 31st. Ismail Chartier is with Renew Wisconsin. He joins us now. Ismail, thank you so much. When we last spoke in September, we talked a lot about this issue in particular. What are you hearing from companies now about trying to meet that deadline?
First of all, thank you so much for asking me to be part of this today. What we're hearing from companies is that basically what you said, that reputable companies have really stopped booking people for this year and letting people know, potential customers know that 2026 is when they can start the project and they won't be able to get that income tax credit at 30% off. So a lot of like in Madison in particular, we know a lot of the vendors have stopped taking on new customers and letting them know that there's a 2026 waiting list that they can get on, but there will be no ITC.
You know, I'm interested in what you're predicting for next year, because when we spoke, you were saying there may be a decline in residential solar as much as 30%. Is that still the number you think we're looking at?
Yeah, we're still looking at a 30% decline in solar and most likely a 30% decline in workforce too. So we're expecting to see a lot of layoffs Q1 and Q2 of next year of solar installers, and we're expecting to see a lot of shutdown of small mom and pop shops that can't afford to compete any longer without the ITC and with the tariffs.
Ismail, I was watching a video from someone who sells solar panels that they were talking about this whole concern about the end of the tax credit. And they were sort of flipping it a little bit on its head, saying, we don't think next year is going to be as bad as everyone's saying, and here's why. When the tax credit goes away, yes, you lose that 30% guarantee, but that next year prices may well come down to reflect that. When demand drops, when people are laid off, when there's consolidation, that these prices may in fact come down. And in fact, it may be the companies that hurt, but for the consumer, it may actually not be as big of a loss as it sounds. Is that accurate? What do you think about that?
I think there's a world in which that could exist, right? Supply and demand really has an effect on the market. As consumer entrance ways, we will see probably prices drop. We will see inverters go down, panels go down. The big issue is going to be the tariffs and how much we can produce domestically as compared to how much we still need to import and pay those tariffs from China.
And right now, we don't produce solar panels in the U.S. Is that right?
We do. We just don't produce enough to cover the demand that's required. So we produce probably around 15 to 20% of the panels that would be demanded. So we're just not meeting that demand yet.
Okay, I was going to say there'd have to be quite an increase over the next year, which I know some people in the industry are hoping will happen, which could help the consumers on the price end of things and maybe the quality. But I know you had expressed some skepticism about that happening as fast as people want it to go.
Yeah, I think we're 5 years away from having like a real viable manufacturing sector. We would have to go all hands on deck and create that sector. And that would need government involvement to help ease red tape, to create stability within the market, to be able to create that, to build that out. So I just don't see that infrastructure being built within the next 5 years.
I wonder, for people who have already purchased or installed these, do any of these impacts on the industry affect what may be available in terms of servicing and repairs? Will that have any impact on that end of the industry?
It could. If you were, and if your installer goes out of business, your O&M, your operation and maintenance could be at risk. But there are several companies like Arch Solar, Eagle Point Solar that have O&M that can come out and do the manufacture, do the operations and maintenance on your system. So that's one of the things that we are anticipating is what we call stranded solar clients whose installer has gone out of business. So they'll need to contact someone like Arch Solar or one of the larger, more reputable companies to come in and maintain that for them.
Obviously, solar can be a major investment, $10,000 or more to put panels on your home. Can people still afford to go solar without the tax credit?
I think the ROI, the return on investment, is still there. We have the highest utility rates in the Midwest. We really pay 18 cents a kilowatt hour. And on average, the consumer can save around 92, anywhere from $100 a month, roughly around $100 a month, around $17,000 over 20 years that would pay the system off. So if you spend 10,000, your ROI is still 10 years. Even that's what it was with the tax credit. So you're still in a good place. If you had battery backup, you're even going to be better if there's time of use charges and things like that. You'll be able to save more money in the long run.
Does this become more attractive as we're hearing about all of these data centers that are being proposed and that are going up? And Wisconsin is one place where we're hearing a lot about proposed data centers, and they are going to use a tremendous amount of energy. There's going to be a demand for energy. Is there, in fact, potentially a payoff if you could create or produce some of this energy and sell it? Or is it just that you might, the rates are going to go up for everyone else because of that demand and you might be in a better place?
I see three potentials there, right? You could sell the additional energy back to your IOU, to your investor operated owned utility. You also have the potential to save money from having it, but then you have a resiliency issue. If our grid can't support that and can't sustain that power that's being sucked by those data centers, you might be the only house in your neighborhood that has power, that has the ability to have lights, that have heat in the winter, have air conditioning in the summer. Data centers are going to be such a tremendous power drain that we really have to look at how the system is going to be able to handle that much drain without it affecting consumers in areas even close to them connected to that same grid.
I'm interested in what it's like working within an industry that is so affected by political shifts and changes. A lot of people say, what goes on in DC doesn't affect me, but your industry really sees direct impacts from who's elected president, for example. What's it like working in an industry like that?
Oh, fun. It's definitely fun.
Are you sure?
I don't buy that.
It's rough. You watch things like yesterday, CDFIs, all the money was pulled back from community development financial institutions for Native communities. And a lot of that goes to support clean energy on reservations. So you watch $221 billion be pulled back from clean energy projects for tribes. It affects the whole industry, but it also really affects people's lives that you work with. So it's rough depending on what politics are being pushed forward and where we're going to see, because it really does affect not just my life, but the 165 businesses that we represent with over 6,000 employees. It really harms their lives and their livelihoods. So it's rough to be part of an industry that is so dependent on politics.
Ismail,
it's fun at the same time.
Before we started the podcast, you referenced the scene behind you there. You're in a forest. You've got woods. There's a lot of trees. For those and I've got a backyard that's like that. My house has tree. It's an old house, so there's really tall trees. I don't really have direct sunlight. I don't know if I'm a candidate for this. How do you know if you're a candidate for solar and if it's going to pay off for you?
Any reputable company that you deal with will do a solar feasibility study, and that solar feasibility study should be done for free. And they'll be able to tell you where if you cannot have solar, or if you can have like a ground array, like you have an opening in your forest where you can put a ground mounted array where you can take that same solar. So really working with a qualified solar installer who's a reputable solar installer. If you go to our website, renewwisconsin.com, we have a list of all the reputable solar installers that follow a code of conduct, and they'll be able to help you walk through that process. You can also reach out to Legacy Solar Co-op, and they'll do a solar feasibility study for you too. and that'll just say whether your land is acceptable to have it or not.
Is there
It'll let you know right away.
is there like a standard size that most residential people will get, kilowatts or whatever it is? What's kind of a typical solar installation for most people?
Between 5 to 20 kilowatts is enough to carry a house with average load. So that's 5 kilowatts will save you about $100 a year, $100 a month on your utility bill. Anything bigger than that will save more, but it all depends on your use. So that's another thing you look at when you're designing an array is what is your actual use? If you use, 400 kilowatt hours a month, you're going to need a different system than someone who's using 100 kilowatt hours a month. So it all depends on your usage.
Ismail, earlier you mentioned that you represent 165 businesses. How many of those are mom and pop places that might be at risk? I mean, how many businesses do you think you could have this time next year?
Oh, I'm hoping we have them all, right? I'm a hopeful person. That's why the solar game is always sunshine. I'm hoping that we will only lose about 20% of them. And I think that we'll lose a majority of them just because the first thing that's going to go is their membership budgets, right? They're no longer going to be able to afford to be part of a membership. So we realize in the solar community that the people that are going to have the least amount of money are going to need the most amount of advocacy. So we're going to maybe work something out with them where we try to keep them on and help them through this. We're helping redesign business plans, come up with ways to get financing. We're trying to help our mom and pop shops navigate this storm until we can hopefully get back to having a better, sunnier summers coming up next.
Everybody knows that I'm the guy who sometimes asks the real direct hard questions. I want to ask this because I was watching, as I mentioned, the video. I wish I could remember who it was that was doing this. So somebody who seems to do a lot of videos about the industry, but also has a solar company. And they were talking about this tax credit expiring. And as I mentioned, they said that they thought next year prices would come down. And so it may not be such a bad deal after all. And somebody commented on that. And what they said was, well, so wait, does that just mean that this 30% tax credit has really just been priced in all along and it's really been the companies that are benefiting, not the consumer? What do you say to that if someone looks at it and goes, well, if prices are going to come down, maybe I should just wait after all?
Well, I think the prices are going to come down because you can't charge as much for panels. You can't charge as much for inverters. You're not going to be able to charge as much for racking. And those are all external factors. I think the cost of labor is going to remain the same. You have to pay electricians who are certified journeyman electricians a wage across the board. So I don't think the labor part is going to go down. And that's what most of the local installers are charging is the labor. And then markup comes from the panels, the inverters, the racking, the screws, all of the connectors, everything that's purchased outside of that. If those drop, say, by 10, 15, 20%, then you'll see really the same price as you saw with the 30% discounts.
I imagine interest rates too are a factor here, right? If those start to drop, that could help in terms of financing these.
Yeah, financing solar in Wisconsin is complicated. We don't have third-party financing or third-party ownership, so you'd have to get a construction loan. But that also helps if the construction loan, if the rates are dropping, you can get a construction loan or a home equity loan at a cheaper rate. That helps with these kind of projects.
We mentioned commercial work in our report, and Arch Solar was saying we'll turn to commercial work next year while those tax credits are still there. Is there enough commercial work to help a lot of these businesses along, or is that only going to a few companies? What are your thoughts on those credits? Because they expire, is it the projects have to start by July 2026 to qualify?
Yeah, they have to start by July 2020, by July 4th of 26 to qualify, and then they have to be completed by the summer of 32. So
they just have to start if they
want.
want.
Just have to start. By start means they have to have significant work done. That's like with the residential tax credit. To qualify, you have to be completely integrated into the grid. You have to be completely turned on, and your utility has to be switched on too. So you have to have that all the way. You have to have mass work done. So you have to have site work done. You have to have racks on the roofs, those kind of things. But that's a much better deal. I think most people that can pivot into commercial are going to pivot into commercial. It's a very popular market right now, not just because of the tax credit or the end of the tax credit coming soon. A lot of large commercial manufacturing has seen the light of solar and how it can really be a great way to lower their costs. So you see tribal casinos looking at solar as a way to lower their energy costs. You see manufacturing hubs as a way to lower their costs. So we really see that as something that will continue into the future,
Well,
especially companies that have ESG goals.
Ismail Chartier, is that right? Did I say that right?
Yep.
Thank you so much. With Renew Wisconsin. I learned a lot today. I appreciate you being here on Open Record. Good luck with all of this. Obviously, the roller coaster or solar coaster continues.
Coaster.
Yeah. Thank you for
Roller
being here.
coaster will always continue. Thank you so much. You guys have a beautiful day.
All right, you bet. Well, it's not just the solar industry that is having all kinds of turmoil right now. Major changes for the Department of Education. What does that mean for student loan forgiveness? Jenna, with the public employee who asked Contact 6 for help, when we come right back. Welcome back to Open Record. Student loan debt is the second biggest form of consumer debt after mortgages. Many borrowers employed in public service jobs are working toward loan forgiveness, but one woman says, claiming it was a challenge. Jenna, tell us about the woman who brought her story to Contact 6.
You know, our stories come to us in all sorts of different ways, and this one actually started with Carl Deffenbaugh. He was emceeing a Brewers run walk, something involving the racing sausages.
Okay.
And Alyssa's mom approached him and explained that her daughter was having these issues with her student loan forgiveness. She said, my daughter's been a teacher for more than a decade, or she's worked in schools, and she's supposed to qualify for loan forgiveness, and it's not happening. So he encouraged her to write an email, which he then forwarded to me, and we took on this story. And so Alyssa basically said, I have met my obligations for public service loan forgiveness, which is a program for people who work in public service jobs. It could also be firefighters and policemen, all sorts of jobs.
And this has been around for years, right? This isn't, I want to be clear, this isn't the same thing as like President Biden's student loan forgiveness proposal that obviously didn't continue. This is entirely different.
No, this was actually signed into law by George W. Bush in 2007. And at the time, it had bipartisan support in that they wanted to make it more enticing for people to take public service jobs and work in communities that need certain public employees. In exchange for these lower salaries, you will get your loans forgiven if you make 120 qualifying payments over 10 years. You make them on time. There's an income-driven, strategy they use to determine what your payments should be. And the idea is if you make all those payments like Alyssa did, your loans will be forgiven at the end of that time period.
So 120 payments, that's 10 years basically.
10
right?
years.
So you faithfully made your payments for 10 years. You're still working in public service. Do you have to still be in that job after the 10 years?
I don't believe you do, actually. I think you just have to put in those 10 years, and your employers have to fill out forms. You have to make sure you're working for a qualifying employer. But that is the idea. You make those 10 years worth of payments. Alyssa worked in public schools in Washington, D.C. She worked for a district in Denver. She's been in West Dallas for 4 years now. And she said, I've been making my payments on time every month for 10 years, and I was told I would qualify, but she was having issues with the studentaid.gov website, which is where you can track your federal student loans. Hers are consolidated. She went to Indiana University for her undergrad, and I believe it was Denver University for her master's. So she had one consolidated loan, and sometime around August of 2024, her payments stopped updating in this online website. And then around November,
she was still making the payments.
She was still making the payments,
right.
But they weren't showing up. And then around November, they updated a bit, but they weren't accurate. And she called them monthly at the Department of Education, Federal Student Aid, saying, what can I do about this to get my payments to update? And they had her fill out the same form 4 times, saying this will trigger the update, this will work. And she said it just wasn't happening. So at one point she had made 122 payments, which is 2 beyond what she should have, but her website said she'd only made 111. So she wrote to us, and this is an example of how Contact 6 can be very effective. We contacted the Department of Education, and 2 days later, her website updated to say, congratulations, you've met the requirements for loan forgiveness.
I saw that in the story, and I just thought that's incredible response. But I also think sometimes you're almost your own worst enemy, because do you create expectations for people that you're going to have a problem that's worth thousands of dollars, and you're going to come to me and in 2 days we're going to get it solved? I mean, that's incredible that it worked that well.
We do hear this sometimes. People are grateful for the help, but at the same time they're irritated that it took us making the call or us sending the email when they've been trying for more than a year.
I was doing all the right things.
But interestingly, I got an email from someone just yesterday explaining the exact same situation as Alyssa. And that's because she's not alone. There are other people waiting on their public service loan forgiveness.
So a couple of questions on this. Number one, first of all, to be clear, public service loan forgiveness, she's a teacher. Do we know what all that covers? What all kind of careers? Is it all public? Like
all sorts of public service jobs. Yeah, it covers, I think they said there are 3.5 million public service employees who qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So it covers a range of all kinds of jobs.
Okay, so they still have to make these payments. They have to make them over 10 years. And she was getting close and then seeing this stop updated. Do we know why? I'm familiar with that website, by the way. I have 3 kids in college and one who recently got out. So I am all too familiar with the studentaid.gov website. And sometimes it can be a little difficult to navigate because you have so many different loans going on and then eventually maybe consolidated. Is it the website problem? Is it all of the turmoil in Washington, D.C.? What do we know about this?
So when I spoke with the Department of Education, and I will say they did communicate with me about her case, they would not pinpoint a specific reason that this happened to her. They did say, we've been making some updates to our system to modernize since 2021. We're working on our digital dashboard, but they never specifically said, this is the reason why that happened. For that perspective, I actually went to a woman named Carol Trone. She's with the Wisconsin Coalition on Student Debt. And she basically said, you've heard the Department of Education in the headlines a lot lately, and that's because it's going through this unprecedented period of time. As she said, Alyssa is definitely not alone. There are others who are waiting. There's a backlog of cases waiting for loan forgiveness. And she said, think of everything that department has been through in the last few years, especially since COVID. Loans have been postponed. You didn't have to pay them for a while. And then there were court challenges and court decisions, and now there are layoffs. So this is a department that's constantly reacting, readjusting, making new plans for how to respond to different situations.
So now we've got the government shutdown. How's that affecting all of this?
I actually thought about this when the government shut down because they were already not making a huge dent in the number of forgiveness approvals for people in public service. So I guess there must be much slower now. I don't know if Department of Ed qualifies as those essential workers, but they've just been going through a lot over in that department. And
I can imagine some people hearing you say Department of Education going, wait, do we still have one?
Right.
Because there was discussion of ending the Department of Education. So obviously a lot of changes there. What I wonder is, you said there's this backlog.
Yeah.
Are these all people who who was it Alyssa? Is that right?
Yeah.
Who, like Alyssa, should already have their 120 and be getting forgiveness, but they're still making payments?
To some extent, yes. So there is a case that came out recently. It was the American Federation of Teachers versus the Department of Education. And they got some data from the Department of Ed for July of this year, basically showing that the Department of Ed decided about 3,300 PSLF, that's what it called, buyback requests. And so they found the number of cases pending was 73,000 versus 3,300. So that's a big number of cases that are in the backlog. And buyback is a bit of a complicated thing, but basically you can earn forgiveness for months that you didn't pay due to forbearance or deferment. Student loans get a bit complicated. We try to keep things very simple in our story. But no, it's people who should be close to qualifying or believe they have qualified.
I was thinking, there's some people who I know they'll watch when they hear student loan forgiveness, and the first thing they'll think is, you took out the loan, you should have to pay all of it back. But I want to be clear, in these cases, these are people these were conditions that were presented to them up front, that if you work in this job, in this field, and we need people in these fields, then you will have this. As long as you meet these conditions, this is what will happen. So these were terms that they were expecting up front when they got into this. Is that right?
Yes. And so there is a statistic out there that says 31% of Americans do not approve of student loan forgiveness. We mentioned when this passed in 2007, it was bipartisan. And I kind of knew this was going to happen, but if you read the comment section on this article, it is divisive. And I actually wrote down some of the responses and the comments we received. So on one side, there were people saying, be a responsible adult. Take care of your own responsibilities. Don't ask someone else to pay for you. Someone else wrote, tell me why I should pay for someone else's school. So that's one side. And then the other side, we have people saying, we have a teacher shortage. If loan dismissal after 10 years of service makes it easier to recruit teachers, that seems like a good investment to me. And someone else said, the loan forgiveness program was put in place to encourage people to go into certain fields or communities that had difficulty recruiting employees. It would be unfair to promise loan forgiveness and then go back on your commitment.
Well, and that's what I think is a distinction that's important here, because I've heard many people, and I think it's sometimes reasonable to say, if you take out a loan under certain terms, and you say you're going to owe this much, and this is how much you have to pay back, and here's the percentage rate, and you sign the papers, and then years later you go, well, I'm really struggling, and I don't want to have to pay this back now. Government, pay it back for me. I see some people going, wait a minute, you took it out. You owe it. That's what adults do. This is different because these were terms they agreed to up front, is if you go into this field, which we as a country want you to do, then after you make these payments, you'll be forgiven. And now they're struggling to get that. So this isn't a situation where they got 10 years into it and went, I want out. They were promised this up front.
Right. And from Contact 6's perspective, if you're legally entitled to this money, we'll help you get it. You know, it's not political in whether or not you get it. I guess it's political in whether or not the program should exist, but the program does exist.
And so what is, obviously you got one person's case resolved. What about for everybody else? What do they do? What's the recommendation?
So the recommendation is to go to the federal student aid website and I think studentaid.gov and make sure you know what your payments are, because a lot has changed recently and people may have lost track of their payments and where they are in that process. So I would go to that website, see what's there. And if you're confused about a payment count or any other issue, you can try Contact 6, which some people have done since the story. But you can also, I found the Wisconsin Coalition on Student Debt to be really knowledgeable. And they can go into the details of your case and really try to help you figure out anything student loan related. So I would actually highly recommend them. They have a hotline and a website, Debt Smarts, it's called.
What strikes me is how important it is to not just trust the website, though, to track your own payments. Because if you see on there 111 and you know you've made 122, well, how do you prove that if you haven't been keeping track of that all along?
Right. And Carol Trone had really said Alyssa did everything right in terms of keeping track, because some people completely lose track of their loans over the years, but she knew what she had paid. And the Department of Education confirmed for me that her loans have been officially forgiven, and she will get a check in the mail for her overpayments, the additional payments she made beyond the 120.
That'll go right into the tally for Contact 6 for the year, right?
Yes. So she didn't want us to say exactly how much money we were able to get waived, but the average student loan debt for someone in this program is about $88,000.
And you didn't get the full $88,000.
No,
I
think we calculated her savings was the amount of payments that they said she had missed, and then the 2 additional payments that she'll get back. So it wasn't the full.
But that's a
full amount.
substantial amount of money, and obviously a big relief, I'm sure, for Alyssa.
Yes, she was very thankful to have this put behind her. She has a newborn. She's working full time. She's got some other financial restraints going on, as many people do. So she was pretty happy about it.
The power of Contact 6.
Hey, thanks.
So often you tell us about stories, and when you tell us that you've resolved someone's issue, I'm sure it's a relief for them, but it's also, to someone sitting out here now going, well, I've got a problem. Maybe Jenna can help. It's an invitation to reach out.
Yeah, we'll help with all sorts of consumer issues. Go to our website, fox6now.com. There's a blue box that says submit a complaint to Contact 6. There's a quick form there you can fill out, and I'll review it with my associate producer Annette, and we'll see if we can take your case.
All right. Well, we are going to take a break. When we come back, we will go off the record right after this. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question. Oh, look who's here.
Me.
It's Sarah Smith.
Hello.
Who's joined us. Hi,
Hello.
Sarah.
Hi. I was just looking at this sweater. So this is way off the topic. So I saw this on, I don't know, TikTok or something. It was like, oh, the viral Target cardigan. So I bought it. I don't really love it, but
I like it.
Okay.
Wait, that's viral?
Well, it was like everyone was buying it. It was like the hot thing. So then I was like, I have to have it.
It's a cute striped sweater.
Because now I've
like
become
it.
that person.
A little bit of old school prison chic.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Burning it. Here's my question. Fashion advice from Brian. Okay.
I know that's
Brian.
Don't take it. It must be a beautiful
Brian
sweater.
posted a picture in our little investigators group chat, and it was of his grocery cart. I assume that's his. But he said, how do you deal with bad grocery store etiquette? Like when someone goes to pick out eggs and parks their shopping cart in front of 3 other doors while they inspect every single egg in the carton. So I then wrote down all the other things that make me mad at grocery stores.
Yeah.
I'm good. We've got time today. I'm
So,
glad because we
You know
could
what's
talk about
funny is I also posted a picture of my grocery cart recently. So obviously we've got really good material on our social media pages of our
Right.
grocery carts.
Well,
There's a lot of bad etiquette.
It is a common thing and people do it. And so they have opinions.
I just put my grocery cart because I felt
Yes.
the picture was called
Yeah.
for, but I didn't want to take a picture of the person because I didn't want to shame them.
Pick for
But
attention. I got it.
I was frustrated because I was,
Yes.
I'm at the grocery store, time's ticking. It's the weekend. You got
You just
stuff to
want to
do.
get out of there.
And the thing is, the egg section is the most popular place. Everyone is waiting for eggs.
Because you have to look at each one. Like you do have to. You don't want to just grab. I never just grab
there
blindly.
were like 4 people gathered around waiting to go.
Yeah.
And there was one person who had put their cart in front of, like, there's 3 doors with eggs in them. And she had placed the cart in front of, I guess it was 2 of them. And she's at the thing and pulling down boxes and going through each one, putting them back, pulling down another, going through each one, pulling them back, and everyone's waiting.
That's called being not self-aware.
And I think
That's
there's a
lack of
lot of lack of
self-awareness.
self-awareness at grocery stores.
Yes.
I had a lack of self-awareness moment at the grocery store recently because I was in front of the avocado section, and
As one does.
and I'm trying to figure out which ones I can eat in the next century.
Yes, you're
Yeah,
trying.
they're so
is this
rock
one
hard.
close enough?
Or
Is this
you're
one
like,
too
I have
late?
7
Right,
seconds
yes.
to eat this before
Right.
it goes
Yes.
brown.
But
Yeah.
I didn't realize my cart was blocking a little passageway, and there was like an elderly man who can't go around.
Oh, yeah.
Right? He was just, and some other woman, I saw her out of the corner of my eye, like move my cart. I didn't even see the man.
yeah.
I didn't know he was there, but I felt
He's talking
really
about
bad.
this on his podcast.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I was, but that's kind of like what I did. Is I didn't realize he was there, and obviously I would have moved my cart if I
Right.
saw an elderly man not able to get through. But yeah, maybe I'm guilty of all these things again. But I also, the line thing is really hard for me because I have a hard time figuring out what line to pick, and I'm notoriously bad at it.
Yes.
I always pick
yeah.
One
the
you think
slowest
is
line.
the shortest, and you're like, this is great. And then that person's like, I'm going to
A lot of times the
check.
shortest line is the shortest because people are like, I can't wait for this person. They're so slow.
Yeah, right. Whose responsibility is it when you are in the checkout line to put the divider in between the groceries?
I think it's if you want to start loading your stuff up onto the thing, I think you
Yeah.
reach over and get it. You can ask, hey, do you mind sliding me that thing?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't have strong feelings on that one.
Okay.
It's funny, in that very picture that I took, this happened, by the way. I was in an aisle and there was the checkout person's doing a thing, and I looked and there were none of the slidey things, dividers. And I said, oh, do you have any of those dividers? And her response to me, I'm not kidding, was no.
Oh.
And I said, oh, all right.
Very
so I went
well.
to the next aisle and grabbed one and came over and put it down.
Okay.
But my question, though, in that wasn't just, does it bother you? Because obviously it bothers me that what happened.
Yes.
It was, what's the etiquette of how you respond to it? Do you say something? Or do you just wait and steam about it? Because
No,
I waited and I steamed about it, and I
Well-
thought maybe I should have just said, pardon me, ma'am, do you mind if I get in there and get some eggs?
I have no problem at this stage in my life walking up and going, hey, I just need to get in this. I just
Yeah.
need to grab a carton of eggs.
And I think people are usually pretty cool about it. They're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
Yes, and they
Right.
go, oh
And-
my gosh, let me
yes.
just get out of the way. Because again, they're in their own head. They've got
Yep.
their list. They're trying to think about what
And
they're
that's
doing.
why I realized I probably shouldn't have just sat there and steamed about it. But so instead of saying something, I steamed about it and
now
then
we're
sent
talking
you
about it on
guys a
podcast.
message, and we're talking about it on the podcast.
Just-
So that's super passive aggressive. I don't know.
Well,
It
but
says
we do
something
the
about
old
me.
Midwest, like, oh, let me just sneak past you here. Just need to grab a carton of
Sorry.
eggs. Yeah.
I'm the person,
we
by the way, at the
apologize
grocery
both
store
times.
who I am paranoid about being in the way.
Me
So
too.
I pull my cart out of the way. The problem is sometimes when you pull it out of the way, you happen to cover the thing somebody
the
wants.
thing.
And like
Inevitably.
no matter where I go, I'm in the way. But if I see that, I immediately apologize and I'm moving it.
Oh, I'm a
But
sorry queen at the grocery
Yeah,
store. Oh, sorry.
absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm just gonna get.
I had a bit of a nightmare situation recently where I took all 3 kids to the grocery store, which is a nightmare on its
journey.
own. But when I got to the front of the store, and we have a huge cart full of food, like I spend a lot of money on groceries
Yeah.
right now, none of the aisles were open. I had to do self-checkout.
No.
Oh, with a huge carton?
Yeah,
A
and like
cartload?
plastic
Oh,
bags
yeah.
and 3 kids, and I was
and
I
probably
felt
like a
bad.
lot of
Like I
produce.
had a
Oh,
moment where I was
takes
like,
so
do I
long.
just leave this whole cart and
Yeah.
just call it this last hour a loss? Because and then
Adios.
Just
it was
let
just
them
so
put it back on the
embarrassing
shelves.
checking out and like everybody's waiting in a line and,
and
I've got such
yes.
a big cart and 3 kids who are not listening.
And I'm sure there was one item that was like, unwanted item in area.
See,
Please call the
let
attendant.
me- well, we're going to wrap things up when we come back right after this. We've got actually a minute here before we are done, and we didn't hear from Dave. Dave, what is it like? What's your grocery store pet peeve?
Well, just going back to the eggs thing, I solve that by not looking at any eggs. I just pick up the carton and
You
go.
just take the risk.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like one egg.
What if
Who
it's
cares?
not? What if it's many?
Well, then that's life. It's not like the eggs
It's
are
eggs,
$20
that's
a
true.
carton.
Not
You know.
anymore.
In this economy?
Right now, yeah. Although, I did a couple of weeks ago, I got one of the 24 packs of eggs because we go through a lot of eggs. But no, here's the problem. It's kind of heavy when you grab it from one end, and I was hurrying up to load the thing.
Yeah.
And I picked it up, and it caught the end of the cart, and boom.
No.
2 dozen eggs on the floor. I was
no.
Yes, that was
I would be
mortified.
mortified.
My wife felt worse than I did. She asked for the paper towel. She started cleaning it up. She's like, let me do this for you because my husband's an idiot, basically.
It's hard. It's so
yeah.
slippery.
It is so
Yeah,
slippery.
no.
People pour like
right.
salt on them to kind of like get them, or sugar to just make it more clumpy versus more.
I never thought of that. I put salt on them to eat them and pepper.
Yeah, but if you're like cleaning them up on the floor,
Never thought
Don't eat
about
them.
that. Anyway, that's all the time we have for this week. I want to thank, obviously, Open Records executive producer Sarah Smith for being here.
I laughed because I was thinking off the record executive producer. I'm also that too.
Did I say off the record?
No,
Oh,
but
okay.
that's what I
Open
heard in
Records
my head,
executive
which is why I
producer.
laughed. That was
Obviously,
sorry.
Contact 6 is Jenna Sachs, Dave Machuda there behind the scenes, and everybody else who's a part of this podcast. With that, I'm Brian Folson. We'll be back next week.